Yeah, I've given permission. There you go.
Got it
Okay.
now. Okay, I'm going to switch over, share my screen, and get started right away. Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so I'm going to say next slide each time we need to move on. So, hello, everybody. Today, Mark and I are discussing our collaborative project, reassessing and revising Harry Shorto's Mon Khmer Comparative Dictionary. We come to this collaboration each with our own motivations. I'm more focused on reconstructing Proto-Austroasiatic. Mark is particularly interested in reconstructing cultural contact and diffusion over the millennia. And the Shorto Comparative Dictionary represents a rich data set for both kinds of work, but it needs to be appreciated for what it is and what it isn't to be used effectively. Next slide. Okay, so the first draft of the MKCD was created in the late 60s by reversing the structure of Harry's draft Old Mon dictionary that he was working on at the time, and which was published in 1971. And then a second draft of the comparative dictionary was created sometime after the 1973 ICAL. And then that second typescript, which I hold today, has many handwritten annotations on it, the last being Nyakur and Proto-Monic items from Deflot 1984. So it seems that Harry continued working on his comparative dictionary through the mid or even late 1980s. He was retired from SOAS in 85 and passed away after prolonged illness in 1995. And the manuscript was passed on to me by the daughter, Anna. Since the publication in 2006, the comparative dictionary has been utilized by many researchers from multiple disciplines. And they've often relied on the Proto-Mon Khmer reconstructions as proxies for Proto-Austroasiatic. However, this is fraught with risk. The comparative dictionary is not a reliable etymological dictionary. It requires critical analysis to be used effectively. In that context, we regard it as a useful resource, not as a result. Okay, next slide. The comparative dictionary entries, you see one here, they're often complex and extensive. It can be difficult to decipher what they really mean, especially if one is not familiar with Harry's work. And also the kinds of other experiments in comparative linguistics that were going on at the time. So we need to have a historiographic appreciation for this work. The comparative dictionary was a product of its era. Another example I would mention here is Phil Jenner's Lexicon of Khmer Morphology, which was published in 1982. Before he passed, Phil expressed to me considerable frustration how his work was misunderstood by some scholars who failed to see it primarily as an analytical experiment in linguistic analysis, not an actual description of Khmer morphology. Similarly, Harry's Mon Khmer Comparative Dictionary is an experiment in comparative analysis. When we look at the entries, we see A, B, C, etc. forms. These are very common. And it looks something like the Sino-Tibetan etymological dictionary Allopham's approach. But really, we should just be looking at these as under-analyzed data. What Shorto is offering here is a teleo reconstruction based on comparing primarily just Mon and Khmer, literally, hence Proto-Mon Khmer. It's a label, not a genealogical analysis. Secondarily, he then added data from 20 other languages, and he did so without recourse to any nested branching models. So he wasn't recapitulating phylogeny. These purported cognate groups are grouped together primarily on how their vowels seem to match the inventory suggested by the binary comparison of just Mon and Khmer. Now, with this approach, Shorto aggregated all possible comparisons he could find in all sources available to him. And in doing so, he stretched semantic agreements and he proposed many ad hoc morphological analyses and so forth to try and fit as much in as possible. So the experiment, we can say, was to see how far this approach could be taken and deliver a maximal comparative set that was systemized with some rationality. It didn't have to be right in terms of recreating real language history, but it had to be rational and testable, and thus be a stepping stone towards a wider discussion that Harry hoped would emerge from his work. All right, next slide. The comparative dictionary was also produced in a very different era of Southeast Asian linguistics. Wilhelm Schmidt's legacy was still casting a long shadow, and debates around relations of the languages to Munda, to Austronesian, etc., were still hot topics. And remember, the Austronesian out of Taiwan hypothesis had not yet emerged. So following Schmidt, Harry gave special importance to Austronesian parallels, particularly with Mon and Khmer. And he treated these as proof of common origin on the mainland. Consequently, the work contains hundreds of Malay, Chum, Achinese, Proto-Austronesian, and other similar references. The data and the analyses are actually skewed somewhat because of this, including in the reconstructed phonology. For example, he reconstructed a series T2, D2, N2 correspondences. And these were done specifically to parallel phonemes that Dempfolf had reconstructed for Austronesian in order to make the point of perceived similarity between the families. Takeaway here is the comparative dictionary is a work of which we have to be aware of what it is and not try and project our current motivations and understandings onto it or its author. Next slide. So myself, among the editors of the MKCD, we understood these issues, and it was not our intention that scholars treat the contents as reliable word histories. Rather, we saw two main things. One, we saw hard copy publication was a respectful homage to the author. Secondly, a data resource that could be effectively exploited using information technology. Hence, from 2009, it was made available by CRCL Bangkok with NEH support, which we got for 4 years. And we delivered the website, you can see it, which is still operating today, is a screenshot here, presents all the data in machine readable form. All data points have unique identifiers. Everything is searchable and aggregable by form and semantics. There's lots of annotations, and a lot of extra content was integrated to the site over the period of the funding. So this is consistent with our view that the value is as a resource. Still, even now in 2022, users of the MKCD must evaluate entries themselves. And this is not very ideal. Even with the assistance of the very good tools on the CLang website, it's still challenging. Evaluation of the materials is not trivial. Users sometimes are overconfident. We see this coming through in publications and manuscripts that have been sent to me for review, amongst others. And really, it's time to move on. And with that, I'll hand over to Mark.
So with this situation in mind, we decided to reevaluate and update the MKCD, lexical comparisons and reconstructions. To do so, we created a spreadsheet with columns to mark various etymological categories, mark branch level attestations for each entry. We indicated updated, or we've been indicating updated in reconstructions of forms and glosses, and provide various notes. And there are more plans. Checking through both Shorto's MKCD and the online Mon Khmer Etymological Dictionary, Munda Dictionary, and other digital resources for each of these entries, we've been noting which of the 13 or 14 branches have attestations for the entries. And, oops, sorry. And in some cases, we mark them as uncertain. Do we have to allow for uncertainty? This allows us to note geographic distributions of the forms. This is crucial, especially whether the entries are attested both inside mainland Southeast Asia proper, but also potentially in peripheral regions that indicates more historical depth or a shallower time period. We indicate possible donor languages, all the typical mainland Southeast Asian etymological sources. We then categorize the entries as Proto-Austroasiatic, Austroasiatic innovations after the Austroasiatic dispersal, potential loanwords, or we exclude entries which are highly problematic or highly uncertain data, not even regional exchange. We've been updating both proto-language reconstructions, that's primarily Paul's job, and updating the glosses as we reassess all the comparative data. And while we're sifting the data, we've noted, some new potential Austroasiatic etyma. We've made good progress, but this is still very much a work in progress. And let's see here. Okay, so Shorto's MKCD does not indicate etymological categories of the reconstructions. So for our project, we've indicated these four general categories here. So again, the Proto-Austroasiatic, later stage Austroasiatic innovations, external loan words, sometimes aerial words, and of course we have some that we have to exclude. The entries we propose to be Proto-Austroasiatic etyma are determined by factors which I will explain in the next panel. Words in this category date back at least to the Austroasiatic dispersal, generally considered to be when Neolithic agriculturalists spread in mainland Southeast Asia some 4,000 plus years ago. The Austroasiatic innovations are connected with various periods after that. This includes potentially large regional nodes of Austroasiatic, but also the spread of interbranch Austroasiatic loads in other subregions. Next, there are the loanwords from various incoming language groups. And of course, in some cases, just the direction of borrowing or the origins are uncertain, right? Finally, we mark as invalid those entries with insufficient and or problematic comparative data. Now, hit the wrong thing there. Regarding the Proto-Austroasiatic items, we take into consideration both linguistic and archaeohistorical information. The list of criteria, the list is not applied in a mechanical way, but rather it's an assessment based on really the total weight of evidence. And of course, in some cases, we cannot achieve complete certainty. However, a key factor for Proto-Austroasiatic etyma is attestation in both mainland Southeast Asian Austroasiatic languages and Austroasiatic and peripheral languages, if you see those maps on the side with some circles. And so, for example, we might see attestations for an entry in Khmeric and Vedic, as well as Mundic and Nicobaric. So that's strong support. The assumption is that such forms must be retentions from the deep proto-language stage and cannot be the result of later borrowing. The Austroasiatic words for nose and arrow, for example, they didn't spread into Munda and Nicobarese in later periods of trade or something like that, right? Basic vocabulary. No, we assume. We naturally expect sufficient phonological and semantic correspondences, though we keep in mind Austroasiatic style word formation matters such as infixes, onomatopoeia, and reduplicants. The usual challenges in mainland Southeast Asian etymology are present, but we now have enough data, digitized searchable comparative data, and of course we have our own past research that can help us with this. We consider as well the nature of the vocabulary, such as whether the words are truly basic or culturally specific and or trade items, and we consider ethnohistorical details when possible or relevant. Other than Proto-Austroasiatic, the Austroasiatic innovations in later periods spread in various subregions, and this becomes clear from our spreadsheet. In some cases, these subregional forms may represent proto-language forms of, say, Northern Austroasiatic or Southern Austroasiatic. But in many of these cases, they have Mon and or Khmer as geographic centers. And so these may represent spread and borrowing of such words from these socio-culturally influential centers. And words such as umbrella, as you can see here, as in the image above there, a word for kind of basket, canoe, or boat are examples of these kinds of words. Shorto also reconstructed a number of words that can be shown to be external loan words based on our now current understanding. For example, there's the spread of Chinese loan words into Dai or Vietnamese, and these subsequently spread into mainland Southeast Asian languages. Now, what this also tells us is that these kinds of words probably were spread in the second millennium. So we have chronology built into some of the claims we're making here. It creates a much more useful picture, I think. Okay. And the current approximate numbers are shown here. These numbers are very much in flux, so these are temporary, very approximate. But it seems that of about the nearly 2,100 entries in Shorto's MKE-CD, roughly 1/3 are indeed Proto-Austroasiatic. Another third are Austroasiatic regional lexical innovations, as I discussed. About 100, or at least 100, are external loanwords, and not quite a third must be excluded. So cutting out those 600 exclusions, that leaves us about 1,500 of Shorto's original entries, still a pretty good number. Thus, the data is smaller in number, but ultimately of a much higher quality and more focused information. So this allows for more effective reconstructions of Proto-Austroasiatic phonology, study of the history of language contact in the region, and other historical linguistic developments in Austroasiatic language history and the region in general. Back to you, Paul.
Thanks, Mark. So focusing on the mainland restricted etymologies, we're able to explore many hypotheses about regional social history. And we're really just at the beginning of the opportunities here. But it seems to us reasonable to divide the history of mainland Southeast Asia into broad phases, which we can associate with specific non-core lexicon, cultural and trade items, items known from the archaeological record, and take into consideration known or hypothetical relations between the branches and the importance of specific languages. And we can label items and characterize them potentially for specific historical phases. The late Neolithic, the early Metal Age, early state formation, the rise of Mon and Khmer states, and more recent historical periods. And for each of these stages, geography and periodization intersect in important ways. So for example, Chinese civilization came into northern Vietnam before the Indic-inspired states developed in the lower Mekong. By far the largest impact showing in our reevaluation of the data is the role of Mon and Khmer. Hundreds of words diffusing across mainland Southeast Asia, revealing much about first millennium regional contact, but also somewhat annoyingly erasing potentially useful traces of information that might have clarified earlier branching relations across the region. In any case, our reevaluation is delivering already very interesting results. Next slide. So just coming to the end, moving forward, we're keen to pursue collaboration and sharing as always. We wish to take this opportunity to enhance engagement with the field. The revised Proto-Austroasiatic reconstruction will be up for discussion before any formal publication. I hope to have a draft, only months away, not years away. In due course, we will share the spreadsheet in which we've assessed all of the Shorto items and labeled them in the manners that we've been discussing, with data marked up for multiple factors, such as semantic fields, borrowability indices, geographical distributions, and so on and so forth. We think this is a great opportunity for advancing our understanding of Austroasiatic language history and regional history. So with that said, we're happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you very much for that instructive presentation, Paul and Mark. So we obviously have some time for questions, and the floor is open to anyone who's wanting to ask one. You can post it in the chat or raise your hand. Well, I'll ask a question then to get things started. You were saying that in due course you'll share these. So if I understood you correctly, you're now at the point where actual PAA reconstructions in some cases can actually be put forward, and not sort of nonce ones or whatever you want to call the right term, sort of pseudo reconstructions, if you will. Are there any ones, tidbits you might share to tantalize us with something?
Well, yeah. I mean, I will talk about these a little in my talk today. So, but I'm right now on my other screen. I'm looking at an Excel sheet with 700 reconstructions, revised reconstructions in it. Right. So we're at the point where we've recompiled all the segmental correspondences and very close to having something that we can share for people to critique.
Great.
I will be talking about some in the next talk. That's I'll be using precisely those.
Good advertisements for the upcoming talk.
Case study.
Jeffrey wants to say something.
Yeah, not so much a question, but a comment. As someone who's made quite possibly even extensive use of the Shorto dictionary, but while I do so, I've been well aware of the problems with it. I'm obviously going to have to wait until I see these revisions that you'll be doing before I finalize the kind of thing that I'm actually going to talk about later today, but also is going to go into the book I'm doing on Malay world ethnohistory. So I look forward to this very much.
Can I say something about that? I think anyone who uses the resources can do what Paul and I did. You can check and you can make some of these evaluations yourselves. You just have to decide what you think the criteria are for that. And so that's, that you don't have, you can look at Shorto's material and you can try, but definitely the fact that we've done some of the legwork will help.
I'm sure it will, yes. I thank you in prospect for the work. Yeah, especially for someone like me who's not an historical linguist but needs the material.
Right.
That way.
Yes.
If I could offer a comment just on Jeffrey's point and Mark's point. So evaluating the entries, one of the problems though is that the context, sometimes you need the whole pan-Austroasiatic context to evaluate things, and you can't expect people to have the background. So it's this legwork. Well, I'll tell you, the legs are tired, but they're still going.
Sometimes if I want to check one entry, I sometimes have to look at several others in a related semantic field or phonological forms. So you're looking at a lot, and then you have to check all of these. It is considerable. It takes a considerable amount of time. Yes.
Nice. We have a question from Ryan. You want to unmute yourself, Ryan? Yeah, great.
Yeah, great. Well, that's one of the more exciting talks I've seen. Just want to commend you guys for all that legwork that is shortly going to save, well, me, I can speak for myself, a lot of time. As someone who does try to do some of this on his own, I utilize the Montgomery Etymological Dictionary on sea lion, nearly daily. Will these insights be integrated there, maybe, or made plans for searchability in some other way? Just curious about your dreams and hopes about that.
Dreams versus reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to say that there are issues such that we're not able to develop the existing Sealang site further. That's limited in what can be done with that. And I would be looking for engagement with new parties who would like to develop online resources, if you get my meaning. So let's talk.
Right. Volunteers are welcome.
Okay, well, that's certainly intriguing. No doubt a fairly daunting undertaking, however. So, good luck to anyone who's down with that. So we'd all appreciate it, no question.